had been in Ukraine since mid-January, and there's all this talk about an imminent war. But what was interesting at the time is whether you spoke to a soldier on the front line in the Donbass region or you spoke to just an ordinary Ukrainian, everyone was brushing off the idea of a Russian invasion. And some people were actually quite upset at the West, especially at Washington, for being so alarmist.
When I first got there at the start of March, we headed to the second largest city, Kharkiv. Now, what was most striking about that city was just the lack of people out on the streets. Many people were sheltering in metro stations that used to be nuclear bunkers during the Soviet era, but also the constant sound of artillery.
What I remember as soon as I crossed the border to Ukraine from Poland is like getting on a van with women returning from Poland to see their husbands or sons who were not able to leave the country when the war started, mostly because all men of fighting age could not leave the country.
We went to a maternity hospital where a newborn baby, Maya, had not had the sun on her face. She had been born underground in this maternity hospital, and her mother said that she hoped for a world or a Ukraine that was peaceful.
We were at a clinic that treats post-traumatic stress disorder, and we spoke to one man, Andre, and he told us how it was affecting him, how he was getting flashbacks, how at times when he closed his eyes things seemed to get faster and faster. And it struck me that at the end of the war we're going to be talking thousands, if not tens of thousands, of people who will suffer from post-traumatic stress because of the war in Ukraine.
Russia took everyone by surprise by coming from the north and advancing towards Kiev when the missiles were flying, when cities were being hit. You could not hear one voice at that point being pro-Russia. And I always wondered that means that the support that Russia had in that part of the country has diminished, or simply people were too afraid to talk.
We can't ignore the fact that in the east of the country, those areas that Russia controls, and even some of those areas that Russia doesn't control yet, there are people there that are pro-Russian, that are not pro-Ukrainian. They feel disenfranchised, they feel more of an affinity towards Russia than they do Ukraine.
For now, the Ukrainian government is requesting more weapons to try to go on the offensive. Winter is coming, and that's also going to play a key role during this war. But what everyone's certain here is that this is going to be a very long war.
But then you have a bigger picture, and that's the rivalry between Moscow and Washington, Moscow and NATO, the expansion of NATO. A lot of people told me on the ground, they said the problem we have is that we have become the battleground between these two superpowers, and yes, the West is helping us. Yes, without the Western weapons, we couldn't advance an inch, or we couldn't regain any kind of territory, we couldn't protect our cities. But unless that bigger problem is solved, then it will be impossible to bring some sort of peace to Ukraine.